All right, what's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to a very special episode of Beyond UX Design Live. This week, we are raising money for the victims of the LA fires. Specifically today, if you want to help us out, we're helping raise money for Mala. She's a single mother and a small business owner, and she lost absolutely everything in the fire, both her business and her home. And we are trying to raise $50,000 for Mala. If you want to take a screenshot or if you want to grab your camera and you could QR code that, grab the QR code, or you can click the little link in the description to raise money for Mala. That would be amazing. We have got an awesome episode today. First, I want to give a shout out to Elizabeth Alli here for helping us out and joining at the very last minute. This was such a last minute thing, but I think it's for a great cause. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. And then I want to give a huge shout out to Lex Roman and Hong Shu for organizing this entire week. I cannot believe you guys have done all this work. It's been amazing watching you guys on Slack, just constantly messaging and organizing this. It's been incredible. Thank you so much for this. So we really appreciate you guys hanging out today. Today, Elizabeth, we are going to talk about leverage as a designer.
Yeah.
And this is something I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about until maybe it's too late, or maybe they wasted their leverage and weren't able to use it or don't have it and need it. So I am so excited to have Elizabeth on today. Elizabeth is a product designer, founder, and teacher who's been building products and working for startups in Silicon Valley for nearly 2 decades. She's currently the co-founder of Siimple, the world's least advanced website builder, and DesignerUp, where she teaches UX and UI and product design with a mindful approach. Elizabeth, welcome. Welcome to Beyond UX Design Live, a special day. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you, Jeremy. You put this together so fast, so organized. This is a really great cause. I had to jump on it because I live in California. I've been here for over 10 years, and I know what it is like when the threat of wildfire comes, which we have a couple of times a year. But
Ooh.
thankfully, I've never experienced what some of the people in Altadena have, and that's what we're raising for today, right? Altadena is like a really rare place in LA. It's one of those places where a lot of families of color and like diverse backgrounds have been able to own their homes. I mean, I was reading that 8 out of 10 African Americans living there own their homes.
Wow.
So it's a really unique place like that, where that's double the national rate, by the way, of this demographic owning their homes
Wow.
in this country. So I feel like the Eaton fires that erupted there were like particularly cruel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that's, I think, what all the designers really got together this week, is to focus on those fires in Altadena and those families, because it's unbelievable. So if you guys are getting value out of this live stream today, which I hope you will, please consider, donating. Maybe we can drop some links in YouTube as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, on the DesignerUp YouTube channel, the link for donation is also in the description, so you can check it there if you just want to click that, and we'll be, showing that as well. So thank you all. And yeah, thanks to Lex and Hong, because they really got all these designers together. And there's more events happening throughout the week, right? So check that Luma calendar and you can join some
Absolutely.
more and see what everyone's doing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And yeah, man, it's crazy. I grew up in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, and I have gone through my fair share of hurricanes,
Hurricanes,
but
yeah.
there's just something about like fire that just terrifies me versus like,
Yeah.
water is one thing.
Mm.
You got advance notice, you can get out, but good God, fires. I can't imagine. That's like one of my worst fears. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you for all that. And this is for a great cause. Yeah. And like Elizabeth said, if you feel like you're getting something out of this, please, for the love of God, donate some money directly to the people that have been affected. That is so important. I mean, given the Red Cross, it's not a bad thing, but all that money, you never know when it's actually going to get to the people in need. We're doing this week, GoFundMe, it's going directly to the people that need it the most, and it's going right in their pocket. And so I think that is incredible. All right. So Elizabeth, so we're talking about leverage today.
Yes,
And
we are.
this is something, I think it's like one of those things where a lot of people, they kind of know what leverage is. I think but it's sort of one of those things where if you're not prepared for it, I think you're not going to be ready to use it when you have it, or you might not even be aware that you lack it. And so when it comes time to need it, it's probably too late. So let's talk a little bit about leverage. I'm really excited. So
Yes.
when you talk about leverage, what does that mean to you? When, because it could be kind of a nebulous. What does leverage mean?
So, you know what? I've been teaching design for a lot of years now, and I've been working in the space for a long time. And since like the early 2000s when I started, um, I feel like it's gotten simultaneously harder than ever to get hired, but easier than ever to make money if you're a designer, which is a weird thing. But because there's so many ways to build things, because it's easier, because we have all of these tools, if you kind of have a little bit of an entrepreneurial mindset or inclination, there's so much that you can do outside of just applying for a traditional job in the UX UI space or just working for a FANG or something like that. There are dreams beyond that that you can have. And I think all of it, even if it is just a traditional job that you're going for, it starts with leverage. Let's just
Mm,
take your portfolio, for example. That is one piece of leverage. You know, it's not just a portfolio for portfolio's sake, but it's something that you can use to get a job. And
mhm.
so for me, leverage just kind of looks like that, right? It's like it looks like doors opening and opportunities coming to you because you have something people want and that they find valuable, right? And like it could be creating systems or assets or anything that you can design really that help you generate more opportunities or more income or more impact.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I love that you call out the leverage is the various tools that we there's sort of I think of leverage as kind of like, they're levers for I mean lack of a better word, but things that you
Yeah.
could pull, sort of things you can use to get what you want, right? And I
Yeah.
think like when we think about leverage, a lot of times it's like within the concept or the framework of negotiating or something like that.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because when you think about that, like you're trying to get something that you want, right? And in theory, you're both pulling the levers to get the things that you want. And in our case, a lot of times as designers, we think about jobs, but beyond that, getting priorities that you want or changing how the team
Mhm.
works or something like that. And so it's just sort of something where, again, like I said, it's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, duh, of course. But like, if you're not really thinking about it and you're not actively trying to influence or use it, I think that's something that you're going to realize maybe too late. So I'm curious, like the thing of the flip side, lack of leverage. When we think about leverage, you mentioned like a portfolio and stuff. Obviously, lack of portfolio, but when you think about leverage, like in the broader sense, like what does a lack of leverage look like? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it feels like always chasing. Right?
Mm,
Always having to sell yourself and convince people of your worth, trying to get people to listen to what you have to say, trying to make an impact. You're always the one reaching out. You're applying for jobs, you're waiting for a response, just kind of like not having chips to play with at the table,
hmm
right? I think
mm,
that's like the general feeling of not having leverage. You don't feel like you have opportunities coming to you in different ways.
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about individual contributors on low maturity teams, or people who are constantly kind of butting heads with their product managers, partners, stakeholders. Same kind of thing. And so for me, like when I think about that lack of leverage, it's like just like you kind of said, like I'm not able to. I'm not able to influence. I can't, get there because there's something I think this is some interesting thing to think about when we think about these relationships and we're kind of butting heads a lot. Those people feel like they have a certain level of control over the rest of the team often.
Mhm.
And so product manager, I mean manager, it's like right in their name, right? So they come into this as sort of power dynamic, kind of sort of like an offset. And so the leverage there is like manager, right? They're in
Yeah.
charge. They are the quote unquote
Mhm.
CEO of the feature, whatever they like to say about themselves. And like
Yeah.
to me, that's sort of like the leverage in a way. That's like their leverage. And they're gonna try to, use that to kind of get what they want. And I think like something that's kind of interesting when I think about leverage too, it's sort of how can you take what they want and sort of flip it and mold it in a way that lets you sort of throw it back to them to get what you want while they get what they want, right? And
Mhm.
and even that is sort of like leverage. It's kind of like I like how you called it tools before. It's sort of like a tool. Like what tools
Mhm.
do you have at your disposal to ultimately get what you want? I don't know if you've ever thought about that before, but I'm just kind of thinking in my head as we're talking and
Yeah.
that kind of just popped up.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say too. So, um, Are you more like, have you spent your career more embedded in organizations? Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
yeah,
Most of my
right?
career. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
so that's interesting. I think we have like two different perspectives as well, like being inside of companies, running teams, being with teams. There's definitely a different type of leverage that you get to build there and
Mhm.
have that kind of say. And then when you're on the entrepreneurial side or you're building things for yourself, there's a different kind of leverage that you can build to get opportunities. So I think we can go into that a little bit because it's interesting because there are so many different ways to build that. There are so many different types. And I think that's where people don't realize just how much they have
Yeah.
that's valuable. And I think a lot of it comes from simply not positioning themselves correctly or not framing
Right.
the skills that they have or the knowledge that they have. And I see this all the time with designers that are transitioning from this field, like from another field into UX, where
Mhm.
they don't even realize they have all these transferable skills simply because they're not framing them as such to create a leverage point or a lever to get them into the industry, right? They just don't think of it that way. So a lot of it is just perspective and how you're looking at what you're doing. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff we can probably get into there.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because I can't remember if Lex made this comment on Slack or if she made the comment on LinkedIn, but she was, we were talking about leverage and the topic. And she's like, designers using their leverage and I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something to that effect. And it made me think like, holy crap, like we have leverage here. Like this is leverage.
Exactly.
This is us
That's it.
getting together, designers coming together, using their
Yep.
platforms to, help other people and all that stuff. And that is leverage. And
That's
it
leverage.
never, it didn't even occur to me, which kind of got me thinking. And I'm curious to hear what you said. You kind of touched on this a second ago, but there's probably a lot of people, and maybe this is even part like imposter syndrome, maybe plays a little bit into this, but people who have leverage but don't realize it. And I'm curious
Mhm.
when you think about that, those types of people, like, are there people that have leverage but don't know it? And, like, how do you identify whether or not you have leverage? Is that something you've ever thought about?
That's such a good question because I think about that all the time. As somebody that like runs companies, that's so important, right? And there's so much to say about it, but one of the things is that if you are trying to figure out if you have it, trust me, you have it. We
Mm,
all have it in
mm,
some way. It's just digging it up and like framing it correctly. For example, when I was working at startups and Notion had first come out, I was making these workspaces for myself just to organize user research and stuff like that, to making tables to put all of my participants in and who I was going to follow up with, and then recording their interviews and putting in there and doing transcripts and all that kind of stuff, right? So, all of that sort of thing and personas and everything like that. And then as I started to teach, I was teaching at some boot camps and then I made my own course eventually. Students were asking like, how can I better organize my stuff? And I was like, well, I have this workspace I've been using for years. All I did was white label it, kind of sanitize it, and
mm,
then I put it up on Gumroad. And that actually became a huge piece of leverage for me over the years. For one, it was something that I gave away and then for free, and people would come and sign up and then they'd see more of my stuff and then it would lead to something else. So
mhm,
that was how that was leveraged. And then at one point it was like a bonus for when you enrolled in my course, and that was another thing. And even today I think we have some giveaways, right? I'm sure you'll probably talk about that for donating. And it can be this little thing that just builds and builds and builds, and all that came from something I was already doing for myself every day to day. And so it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be something so small and that you share with other people, and that attracts things to you that you probably couldn't even imagine that one little thing would attract.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, I like thinking about that, and it's interesting because I feel like it's one of those things, and I'm tying this to imposter syndrome, and I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's one of those things where I think like people,
Yeah.
they probably have it. And a lot of times too, if you, especially if you've been put in a position, like even individual contributor, right? The leverage is you're the UX designer, you're the designer, product designer, growth designer, whatever your title is. And that's your job on the team. And so it's the rest of the team's
Mhm.
job to ask you for your input as it relates to things related to design. And that is your leverage. And there's certainly and I've seen this consistently in my career where there's people that are put in that position that that are scared to speak up in meetings, or they are
Yeah.
scared to put their foot down,
Yeah.
or they are scared to, give a contrary opinion in a meeting or something like that. And it's one of those things where I think maybe again this is sort of where I'm thinking about it from imposter syndrome perspective, but they have the leverage, they have the power, they have the ability to maybe influence, but they're afraid to do that. And I'm curious, thinking about that, have you experienced that in your own career? And if so, like how did you get past it, or how do you advise people to sort of get past that? I call it imposter syndrome, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. I love that you're kind of tying this to imposter syndrome, because I think absolutely that's at the heart of why a lot of us don't recognize that we have leverage
Mm,
or don't even use it. I think it was Rid that posted on social media the other day about how he replied to an email for an interview, where he just bullet point all the reasons why he thought he was perfect for this job. And he was just
yeah.
really selling things that other people might completely overlook, like the fact that he just loves educational platforms, or like I'm maybe misquoting the
Mm,
post, but from what I remember, the general sentiment was just that all of these things that make him really perfect for the job that are very specific to him. And I think that we are always thinking that the thing that we're doing or thinking is just like stupid, and that
yeah.
everybody knows that already, and that like I'm not going to share that, that's dumb.
Hmm.
And my very, very first YouTube video was like 7 years ago, and it was how I choose colors. I had a method because I was teaching a student who was colorblind, and I was thinking of how can we come up with ways to pick colors that don't involve just eye work, like just,
Hmm.
eyeballing it. And I came up with this little HSB system where you just use math, and you'll
I love
find a
that. Yeah.
perfectly balanced color palette just using numbers. And I put that video up because the students I was sharing it with were really crazy about it in the workshops. And they were like, you should share it. And I was like, all right, why not? I'll throw it up there. I've been
Hmm.
doing this workshop. I'll record the video one day. I'll throw it up. It's the worst video ever. Like the quality is so bad. Don't watch it. Don't go.
Yeah.
Don't
Oh,
look.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm
So
doing it.
bad.
Watch out.
The audio, like people are like, why does she sound like a zombie? Because I was like, hello. Today we're going to talk about color. I had no idea how to
Yeah.
do the YouTube thing. So it was really awkward. But that video today, till this day, is still one of my best performing ones,
Wow. That's awesome.
because
Yeah.
it's just some little like idiosyncratic way that I did
Hmm.
something that people also like found useful. And not that long ago, I posted a video too about how I figured out after years of using Figma that you can copy, like if you have you're designing something on a
Hmm.
frame, you can copy that frame as a PNG
Oh, yeah.
and then paste it, right? So
Yeah.
stupid, but I used to
Exactly. Like
export it first onto
hmm
my desktop and then bring it back in to use it as a graphic or something like that. So,
hmm
but I mean, that video got so many views, and I'm like, wow, like, so let's just say that for everything you feel stupid about, someone else feels stupid about too. Probably 20, 30, 50, 1,000 people feel stupid about too,
hmm
because nothing is unique to us. There's
Right.
no unique experiences, I swear. And so that makes me feel a little better about posting these things, because truth is I did it. I did it one time and I got verification. And that gives you a little bit more confidence. And every time you do it and you get a little bit more positive feedback, or even negative feedback, because that, sends you in a different direction, then you feel a little bit more confident, and you build those little stacks of confidence over time. And then you just start blabbing your mouth off like we are here. And then
Then
maybe
you
one
can't
day you
shut up.
get to use it for good. Yeah. And raise money for a good cause like this, because we're
Yeah.
able to mobilize because we all have little followings or whatever it is, and maybe we're going to be able to raise more money than this person otherwise would be able to get. So that's how you do it. You just
Yeah.
build it over time.
I love that. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that too about just assuming that other people know what you know. And I've
Yeah.
been going and doing these cognitive biases every week for the last like couple of years. And
Ooh.
now that I'm calling it out, I cannot remember the name of this one, but there is a cognitive bias that where you assume everyone knows what you know.
Yes.
And oftentimes it causes like conflict when, you're like, well, how could you not know that? What are you, stupid? You don't know that thing. But then it also, the flip side of that is, well, everybody knows this. What's the point in sharing it? And so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny because same thing for me. Like when I was writing my book, or before I wrote my book, I was thinking like, this is, everybody knows this. Like, come on, this is
Mhm.
so silly. Like, I'm just like repeating a bunch of other crap, just like you said, nothing's necessarily original. And I've been just surprised like by the feedback that I've gotten about it being, oh yeah, this has helped me, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking like, I really, because like I just assumed everybody knew these things, but it's like you don't even think about it. You don't think about the leverage you have until you start trying to apply it. And I think that's the key takeaway there.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and
That's so true.
so so let's take a break real quick and we'll go back to Mala. And actually, you know what I should have done? I have a way to do this. Lex actually suggested that I put this up and I did not do it, but I'm going to go ahead and share. How do I do
Yeah.
that? Share the screen. Let's see.
Okay, yeah, looking good.
I'm going to share my screen with Mala GoFundMe. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see that? All right. So I can't take credit for this, but Mala already had $16,000 before we started promoting it. And I don't think I definitely don't think this was from us. Somebody donated $1,000, Glossier Inc. I don't know who that is. I don't know if they're actually listening or if they're just found Mala online somehow.
Well,
But
yeah, I checked it right before
yeah,
the stream, and it was at 16, like 8,000, somewhere around there.
yeah, so this is awesome.
Amazing.
So
Mhm.
we're hanging out today. One, I'm having a fantastic time talking to you, Elizabeth, obviously, but also we are
Same.
here to raise money for the LA fire victims. And Mala is a single mother, single business owner, lost her home, lost her business. If I am reading the description right, she had a laundry business and lived up above it, and the laundry business was beneath. The entire building
Oh,
burned down. Single
God,
mother.
that's
She's
even
got a couple
worse.
girls. And can you imagine that? And that's like their only source of income. So we are trying to raise money for Mala, and anybody who donates today, uh, the top the top donation will receive a free copy of Beyond UX Design and a copy of Elizabeth's book as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Elizabeth?
It's leverage, right?
There you go.
Hopefully, we get to reward someone because we happen to, write down our thoughts in written format somewhere along the way. And now that became something that hopefully we can incentivize people to help with. So yeah, it's just another demonstration of what that can do. And it's so wonderful when it gets to do something good.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And so please donate anything, any amount helps. $5, $10, $1, $25, $1,000, whatever you can give would be amazing. And if you are getting anything out of this, please think about donating. That would be absolutely amazing. All right. So, Elizabeth, I got a question for you. Thinking about this, we just talked about the people who have the leverage but they don't realize it. Let's talk about the people who don't have leverage. So we talked
Mhm.
about lack of leverage a little bit before. When you think about leverage and not having leverage, how does one go about getting leverage? What are some things they can
Um,
do?
So there's a couple of things. One is that you can start where you are. Like the example that I gave about my workplace template and what I was doing in
Mhm.
Figma. Um, Whatever you're doing, you can start building something a little bit bigger around it, right? So, like if you have a great resume template that got you hired once, why not, white label that and share it? That could be something that you leverage. Another thing could be, there are different ways to position yourself when you're a designer. If you are, let's say you're like, I have a lot of students that are graphic and web designers and they're just trying to find work or more clients in that space. You can platform position yourself, for example. So if you're really great with Webflow or with Framer, you can kind of be that go-to person that builds
Mm,
websites in Webflow. You could position yourself as a Webflow designer. And that is really, all of this is just really about knowing yourself, right? It's about knowing like what you're good at, what you are energized to do, what you're drawn to do. For example, you could be a community builder. If you're that kind of extroverted person that is a real people connector, you kind of know everyone, right? And everyone knows you, and you're just really good at bringing folks together. Grace Ling is one from
Mm,
Design Buddies. Perfect example. She was on Jeremy's show a while back too, and
love
it
Grace.
was amazing what she did just by
Yeah.
being a social butterfly and
Right.
connecting
Yeah.
everyone
Isn't it
together
crazy?
and being wild and like running events, and just how she was able to leave her job at EA and EA Games and like build this whole thing just on a Discord channel. That's all it took. All it took was starting a Discord channel and talking to people and connecting them with resources and each other. And so that became a huge point of leverage where all of these brands and different things came to her wanting to work with her and that sort of thing. And even that, like a lot of the jobs that I had gotten came from something that I did outside of my portfolio or a personal project I was working on or some learning that I had during something that I did and how I framed it in my portfolio, how I made a case study out of it. It's like, how did you make a big deal out of it and make it really pretty? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you can do that with anything. You really can. And it is really just about framing stuff. Like, you can be an industry positioned designer, right? In the early days, I was the girl in Silicon Valley that you went to when you had a bunch of engineering design debt. That means all these startups
Oh,
in the
wow.
valley whose engineers and business teams decided they wanted to make a SaaS app and they made it without a designer, without doing UX research. They got their MVP out there, they got money, right? Because there was funding was easy to get in the early 2000s. And they had this thing now that they had competitors with better design apps, better user experiences. They knew their customers better and they were dying. So they would call me and I would do an audit of the SaaS software and actually show them that yes, you need to talk to people. You need to do some user research. You need to ask them what they think. You can't just design whatever the heck you want
Hmm.
because you have like, a boilerplate template and, whatever. So we've all seen those enterprise software things that are like, it looks like a designer's never touched it. It just looks like a database that was skinned, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that was what I
Spreadsheet.
would go in and fix. And so that kind of became the word of mouth leverage for me. I'm the girl that, oh, like this startup used her, and then this one used her, and then this one used her, and
Mm,
that kind of that thing. So that can change for you over time as you build more skills and as you do more things. But the more that you recognize what you're doing and packaging it up, that's how you can start to build it. And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything big, but on a grander scale, you can kind of some of the interesting business models that have come up for designers lately is like productized services is what it's being
yeah.
called.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these designers are basically subscription services, and you subscribe to them. You pay a monthly retainer. We used to call it a retainer. I guess we're calling it
Yeah.
like a
Now
subscription.
it's a subscription. Yeah.
Same thing. And these startups are paying 4 or 5 up to $10,000 a month for
Mm,
designers who are keeping everything oiled for them. They don't have
mhm.
the funds to salary a designer at this time, but they're hiring freelancers to, keep their websites updated and, build webflow landing pages and sales funnels and stuff like that. And that's all that is old school client work and a retainer being framed as this thing
Mhm.
called a productized service. So it's all packaging, it's all marketing.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
if you start to do a little bit of research about marketing and how to do that kind of stuff, right? You'll start to see what you do differently. You'll start to see ways that you can put that together, like, and then you
Yeah.
otherwise just wouldn't.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. And a couple of things like I'm kind of thinking about too is just, doing your homework. I think oftentimes can get you leverage, like finding an interesting insight out that you
Yeah.
otherwise might not have known, and use the example of Rid. He did his homework about that company. He did his homework about what, maybe it could have just been as simple as browsing their website and understanding their
Hmm.
offering, but doing that homework, figuring out what do people care about? What is important right now? What is the market looking for? What's
Yeah.
popular today? And that kind of thing that can then go and find, some leverage there. Sorry, I got
Mhm.
distracted. Hung was just like commented, and I'm like reading his comment as I'm trying to like talk.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
do
I'm
two
so
things at
sorry
once. Hung, you screwed me
about
up.
that.
Anyway, yeah. So anyway, but doing your homework and kind of like exploring that and finding other things, those that can also be leverage, right? I think of like you mentioned information, or you mentioned tools. I think information, right? Data,
Yes. Oh,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff,
So
insights,
true.
that leverage, having that
Yes.
is another form of leverage. If you don't have it, you can always go find it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I think,
agree.
I don't know, I'm curious what you think about here, like leverage as it relates to influence. Do you see
Yes.
those two things as the same, or do you feel, is there a nuanced difference between influence and leverage, or maybe influencers just know how to use their leverage? Maybe that's the difference. I'm curious what
Yeah,
you think. It got me
that's
thinking
a
about that.
good point. I think too, I also want to ask you kind of like how you see information being leveraged in the workplace too, like how to
Mm,
get yourself promoted or how to get more
yeah.
buy-in from people and stuff like that. And to your question about do I see leverage and influence the same? Yeah, I do, so I do think so, because like if you have these things, whether that's information or assets or tools or workflows or whatever it is, whatever that thing is, that piece of leverage, or you
Mhm.
can use that to influence whatever it is you're doing, something in your job, people to give you money, or
Yeah.
brands to come work with you, or all sorts of things. Like I think even if it's just a piece of leverage, let's say that we're
Mhm.
defining that thing, whatever that thing is, you can just stack those things, so you can have a great portfolio,
Oh, I love it.
and then
Yeah.
you can also have this other piece, I think, of leverage, and then all of those things together you can use to influence a decision or a choice or someone to do something that you need them to do, or that would be helpful
Yeah.
to the project, or that would move this initiative forward, or whatever it is. And it doesn't even have to be anything as concrete either. It can simply be storytelling, right? Storytelling is so powerful. How you take
Yeah.
information and how you tell a story about it, how you make people care. Some of my students are so good at doing this. In my course, for instance, one of my students is working on a project where she's developing a way to help conserve food waste. So,
Mm.
one of the students, well, she started out her project with like, we waste like 60% of all the food that we buy, blah, 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 blah. And it was good, but I was like, I want you to practice a little storytelling here. I want you to really get personal with it. And she redid it, and the story was, I challenged myself to put a quarter in a jar every time I threw away some food. By the
Oh,
end
I
of the
love it.
month, that jar was full. And that kind of
Wow.
hits different. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's just this way of stating the same exact thing that she did before, but in a personal way that just has some emotion to it. And it makes someone immediately feel like, I know what that would feel like. Like, holy crap, if I had a jar full of quarters by the end of the month because I threw out that much food, it's visceral. And I think
Mhm.
that's what storytelling does, right? It makes the thing visceral for another person. And that's what we're trying to do in UX with our personas and things like this. That's why we make all of these, like deliverables. And so we're not just making it for the sake of it. It's just to say, hey, this is the why behind what we're doing. And if you can
Yeah.
get people onto that why, it can be as simple as a story that you tell to other stakeholders on your team, to get them to give a shit. Like, it's
Yeah, yeah,
just,
yeah.
right? It can be something like that, and that can be your leverage, and that can be
Yeah.
driven by data. It can be driven by story. It can be driven by whatever you're good at.
Yeah, I love it. So you asked about leverage inside of a large organization.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you think about tools, right? And
Mhm.
leverage using your tools and what tools you have at your disposal. And I think this is my personal opinion, and I say this all the time, and I believe this to the core of my being. But you cannot build great software without great relationships, and I think that applies
Yes.
smaller orgs, but it's especially true in larger organizations. And I worked in a large org. We had 1,000 designers. I'm sorry, 1,000 engineers, right? 1,000 engineers.
A
And that
thousand
was not
engineers?
1,000 engineers. That was not including product people. That was across the entire org. I mean, this was GE Aerospace,
How many
gigantic company,
designers
right?
were there?
30.
Yep. That sounds right. I knew it.
Yeah, 30. So, and that 30 was broken up into multiple teams that were working with all these large engineering teams. So we had like gigantic, and these 1,000 engineers, by the way, they did not work together, which was the problem. So you had large organization that was broken up into smaller organizations that were, in theory, all supposed to be aligned, to meeting some goal. And what you ended up having was a bunch of silos with a bunch of
Yes.
budgets and a bunch of priorities that were
Yeah.
absolutely not aligned at all. And one of the reasons why I say relationship is so important, something like this, like if we're trying to build, a legacy, build a new thing and integrate legacy systems, integrate an
Mhm.
ERP, integrate
Mhm.
something else, and build a new thing and third party APIs and think about
Yeah.
security and think about all this stuff. Like, how do you do that if you don't know the people on those other teams that you have to work with together to get it
Right.
to be done, right? It's impossible. And so for me, relationships, one, they help break down those silos. And that's a lever I think that you could pull is like, hey, so and so down the hall is working on a similar thing. Why are we building it? Or should we be sharing?
Yes.
Or should we be talking, right? Or it could
Exactly.
even be, as simple as, understanding priorities that are going to be coming down the pipe, right? Like we've got this gigantic team. I've never spoken to the CEO because he's like 8 levels higher than me.
Right.
But all these other
Yeah.
people beneath them, they know things. Like, can we talk?
Yeah.
Can we figure out what's coming and how do we know like, hey, you want to build this thing, but this priority is going to directly conflict with that thing. Should we be building that thing this quarter or something? You know what I mean? So those
Yeah.
relationships to me levers that you're pulling and understanding, and it helps one to understand what to build. It helps to understand
Mhm.
how to build
Mhm.
it. It helps to understand if it's the right thing to be building, the right time to be building it, because it might be the right thing at the wrong time. um, and then you talk about careers, like having these conversations with all these people. The recency bias is another thing. Like we tend to promote people that we think of first.
Yes.
you know
Yes.
the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And when we talk about leverage, relationships, I think, are a huge piece of that. And you can go in and have conversations with people. You can be known as the silo wall breaker, or the breakdown. Jeremy
Yeah.
breaks down silos or something. And
Yep.
that's also leverage. And so anyway, that's kind of how I see that. I think we could probably talk for hours just about
Yeah,
how to do that
right?
in a large org, but
Oh,
that's kind of how I see that. I don't know if you've got any thoughts from someone who's worked in
yes.
startups and stuff, but
Oh, that's so true. One of the other ways, like, to position yourself, that I have listed in my notes is, like, networking leverage, right?
mm,
Like, whether that's just building a strong network of people or, like, inside of organizations, that is so huge. So, I used to so imagine, I'm a woman of color. I'm going into these tech startups in
oh, I
the like
bet, yeah.
mid 2000s in
Bunch of
Silicon
bros,
Valley.
yeah.
Let's just say they don't look like me, right? We got a
Mhm,
bunch of Stanford bros in here, like
yeah,
just that energy, that vibe,
yeah,
right? So, like for me, it was just really a matter of becoming a chameleon in those environments and kind of matching that energy a little bit. And also, I would constantly notice that in a room full of people like that, there's usually one alpha. Okay. There's this
oh, yeah,
one engineer that is kind of like the ones that all the others are looking towards. So if I say something and he doesn't like it and it gets shot down, the other guys ain't gonna rally around me, right? They're gonna back the alpha. So
mhm,
I would go in and say, all right, I need to understand this person. What do they value? Maybe they don't value storytelling. Maybe they value hard numbers and they want to understand that. And that's what you need to communicate, because whenever you're in a room full of people with obviously differing opinions and ways of going about things, it's really about you're not working against those people, you're working against the risk averseness, like of the person who's most risk averse in that room, right? And someone is going to have a bigger stake in this particular feature or this thing, or be more worried about something, more worried about runway, or how much time this is going to take or cost or whatever it is, and you got to find out what that is and you have to ease that. And so I would go in, I would find the alpha in the room, and I would try to speak his language, get on the same page as him. And once you do that, everyone else falls like
yeah,
dominoes.
yeah, yeah,
So that was how I got through it. And I would have a lot of my friends who are also females in the industry say that they had the worst time working in these male driven environments. And I can see it, but I never personally had that experience just
Mm,
because I think I always tried to go into everything with discernment. Like, I'm not going to go in with judging. I'm not going to say you're an asshole and blah, 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 blah.
mhm.
I'm just going to say, okay, you have a different way of seeing the world and what's important on this project. And I want to try to at least see how that is. Like, what is that? And what like parts of what I do can I amplify to
Mhm.
make that more clear for you or to make that, more understandable. And I feel like you just break down barriers so much more easily. And next thing you know, you're like best friends with that person and it's
Yeah,
great. And you start like being able to work more fluidly together. So
yeah,
you have to like kind of like take down, that disruptive energy or that fighting or that back and forth or whatever it is sometimes. And yeah, sometimes it's really just about learning to read a room better, like,
yeah,
and taking
yeah,
cues or whatever it is. It's little stuff like that. So yeah, that is so important what you were talking about. I
yeah.
have a million examples like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you call that out, and I've said this before, and I've gotten feedback that I've heard people push back on it. I'll say that, but I personally don't think most people at work are bad people. I don't
Hmm.
think most of them are trying to. I don't think most of them want to build crap. I think most of them want to actually build really great stuff. I think a lot of them just don't know how to do it. They have a certain way of working. Some people are great to work with, some people are very difficult. And I think for the
Hmm.
most part, I like to say assume positive intent. And I think for the most
Yeah.
part, I think that's true. And I think a lot there are with the caveat that and this is the feedback I've got, like there are people absolutely that you will work with at some point in your career that are awful, terrible, scum, they're jerks, they're assholes, they're just garbage people. But I don't think that's I don't think that's the majority. I think that they are the minority. And as I'm thinking about this, it's interesting because like I feel like that mindset that you're talking about, where you're assuming positive intent, you're trying to get to know them, you're trying to break down, like crack that shell of the alpha shell, if you will. That to me is also leverage. Like that's a form of leverage. That's a way to get work done. It's a way to get what you want, and it's a way to get what they want, and
Yeah.
it's a way to meet in the middle. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that's because the other side of that is just like assuming everyone's terrible and you're out to cancel
Hmm.
everybody because they said something you didn't like or microaggressions or something like that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think that in itself is a form of leverage. I don't know
Yeah.
what do you think about that, but
Canceling everyone is a form of leverage too, probably. I mean, there's
oh, that's
bad
true.
leverage.
That's certainly
There's
true.
bad
Yeah.
leverage also. It depends on the kind of person you want to be and the kind of,
Oh, that's
how you
true.
want to show up in your life. And I prefer to, yeah, like you said, assume positive intent and that, you know, um, just try to see where we can meet in the middle. And like,
I love that.
I think for a designer, and this is something I preach and teach a lot because it's the thing that's really separating a lot of people from getting hired right now, engineering knowledge,
Mm,
to understand the tech stack. You don't need to be able to code. You don't need to go terribly deep in it. To know what an API is, to
yeah.
know how to read some API documentation, to know what GitHub is, to just know are you guys using React and Tailwind to build
Hmm.
things? Are you using a JavaScript framework? Like just generally, like how is this thing put together? That kind of stuff is huge leverage for a designer because it's
Hmm.
something 90% of designers don't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone, when they come into a job interview, they're expecting you to talk about Figma. They're expecting you to show some user personas. They're not expecting you to show, well, I decided to make this design decision because we're using this API and I didn't need to design it from scratch.
Hmm.
I could take this widget and restyle it. So that's what I did. I saved my team, 30
Hmm.
hours this week. I got users testing it faster and got user feedback. And now we're out and we're finding product market fit. You start talking like that, that's huge leverage, okay?
Yeah.
That's like big energy for a designer. And you're going to move yourself to the top of that stack in that interview because I can guarantee you other interviewers are not coming in and saying
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I love that you call that out too. And I tie this back to again, like my unifying theory of software, which is this idea of relationships. And I go back
Yeah.
to that is engineers are more willing to trust you
Yes.
when you can speak
Oh,
their
yes.
language, right? When they
So,
can have a
so
conversation with
true.
you and they don't have to repeat themselves, they don't have to
Yes.
explain
What?
everything again.
Yeah. I hate
When
that.
yeah, when you understand what they mean when they say it's a back
Mhm.
end service or it's a server side thing,
Mhm.
we can't do that on the front end. And you keep
Yes.
saying like, well, why do we have to refresh the page? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and they're just like, we can't because it's a back end service. Like, there's just
Yes.
nothing you could do about it. Like, you could argue and
Yes.
say it's the wrong way to do it. Okay, fine. But you're not going to make any friends with the engineering team when you insist that like this thing shouldn't happen or whatever, when that's
Yes.
just a constraint that you have. And so, but that's like, it's a lever. I love that. It's like leverage that you have, but it's also to me that beautiful part is like it's a little seed that just you plant the seed of that
Yes.
relationship, and it starts to build trust because they know that they can trust you, they know that they can have a conversation with you, and they know that they don't get
Mhm.
frustrated and all this stuff. And so anyway, I just love that. I love that call out, and I totally agree. I think that's 100% true. You don't have to learn to code, but you've got to speak the language of your team, whether that's like the product team,
Yeah.
executives, right? I mean, this goes
Yeah.
back to I think like when we say, "Oh, you got to learn business or learn the business."
Mhm.
You don't have to get an MBA, but you
Yeah,
have to
right.
understand when like executives are in a meeting and they're talking about a thing, you have to know what they're saying,
Yeah. At the
and
very least.
that's a form of leverage too. I love that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, those are such good points, like, when you talk about engineering, like, they really do hate to repeat themselves. Um, like, it can go such a long way for you to understand that, and I a lot of times too, when designers say that they have trouble getting buy-in or getting a seat at the table or whatever it is, a
Mhm.
lot of times that's just a misinterpretation or
Yes.
misunderstanding of the constraints.
Mhm.
Because there's it's not that your engineers are just being, bullish on their point of
Mhm.
view or their implementation. It's a constraint of the tech stack or, something that they're working with, and it's not necessarily always the best approach for your users, right? Users don't want a loading screen. Users don't
Right.
want this, that, and the other. Yes, we understand that. We can all agree on that. But users also want everything for free all the time and to work perfectly and not have everything go down. We all want that. But there are limitations to technology. And understanding that means that maybe it's not that you didn't get buy in, there was no buy in to be had. It's just more understanding and more clarity and context of the constraints. And when you have that, then you realize that, okay, yeah, we have to look at this in a holistic product way and say, okay, we're not just user advocates, we're product advocates too, right? We're business advocates, we're
Mhm.
advocates of our relationships. And
Yeah.
sometimes you take the L in some space to take a win on a relationship, to back someone, even though you may not 100% be behind them, because that relationship is really what's important. Like you said, at the heart
Yeah.
of this thing, you guys got to work together to make something better tomorrow, the next day, the next iteration, the next version release. And if you can build up some brownie points, maybe on the bigger things, you will actually have some leverage. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
I
that's
love it. All right, so we are coming up at the end of our
yes.
hour. Before we get out of here, Elizabeth, any closing thoughts before we pitch one more time, helping out Mala and her family? Any closing thoughts on leverage that you want the world to know?
Oh gosh, yeah, I would say, to kind of sum up all the things we talked about, um, people and how you collaborate with them and work with them, it's really important. Like Jeremy and I literally got together, was it yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
Just yesterday and put this entire thing together.
Yeah.
Like, he was literally like, "Does somebody wanna do something?" And I'm like, "Does somebody wanna do something? Let's do this together. Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
figure it out." And we communicated. We weren't even sure how we were gonna, do the simultaneous simulcasting stream on different channels and everything like that. But we figured it out because, we learned how to work together and, like, how to communicate and all that kind of stuff. And, like, I trusted what he was gonna do, and he was so fast to just, put everything together and pull it all, you know, together, and just being helpful and like wanting to make this vision that we have for this thing a reality. And so that's what you think about. And you think about what you're good at. Like, I don't mind getting up here and chatting live and doing videos and being on camera. It's pretty comfortable to me. It's pretty chill. So I've used that as leverage. I make a lot of videos on
Yeah.
YouTube and I teach, right? And like, Jeremy's really great at chatting with people and getting the best out of them and making them feel comfortable and like,
Oh,
live
thank you.
streaming. So
I appreciate
I
that.
think that's a leverage that he has. And so look for what you're good at and then do something like I did, just little things where you stand. Just putting together some documentation to help like new people, new designers that are onboarding in your company or whatever it is. Little things like that, they're going to remember. They're going to be like, well, that was really helpful. Like Jeremy sent me some links about, how to set up this streaming thing. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like that was so helpful. I didn't have to go dig for this on Google. Stuff like that you remember, right? So it doesn't have to be anything big when you think about leverage. But you can think bigger. You can start, a productized service. You can do something more extreme and like push and grow and scale yourself and your business or your ideas. And, even if it's just making your portfolio like 10% better this week and your case study like a little bit better storytelling or,
Yeah.
whatever it is, all those things, they stack. And I call those leverage stacks. And the more of those you have, the more things you can do with it and get yourself out there and, hopefully be thriving as a designer.
Right on. I love it. This has been an incredible conversation. And at some point, Elizabeth, we got to get you on the show, on record
You got
on
it.
an episode of Beyond UX Design and talking about this.
Definitely.
And well, we can have almost the same exact conversation. If we schedule it like a few months out, I will forget all of
Yeah.
this and it'll be like like we never talked. All right. We'll talk offline. We'll get you on Beyond UX Design. I'd love to have you.
Beautiful.
All right. So before we get out of here, we got a few minutes left. One more time, we just want to give a shout out to Lex Roman and Hangshu for all of their effort organizing this week's events. There's a lot of other really awesome designers. I was just looking at the list. I don't think there's any more for today, but Allison Gretz next tomorrow.
Right.
Miranda
Yeah. I'll see
Slater.
that.
We're going to have Aaron Walter and Eli Woolry from
Mhm.
Design Better
That's
podcast.
a good
That's going to
one.
be tomorrow. What else? We're going to have Yvonne Shao from we're talking about content design. And then Lex is going to, I think Friday, she's going to, should I start a newsletter? That's going to be awesome. And
It's
Ryan
gonna be good.
Rumsey and Peter Merholz and Hong are going to rank more more
I love
more
that.
companies on their UX maturity. I love it. That makes me
That's a
laugh.
really fun one. If you guys want to see them tier ranking like
Oh,
S
it's so
tier
silly.
companies, and it's really fun. Go check that
Yeah,
out.
yeah, I love it. I like grilling and hung about that. All right, so today we are raising money for Mala and her family. Anything that you can do would help. Mala, single mother, she had her own business, small business owner. They lost everything in the fire, and they would love some help from us. So if you can donate some money today, if you got anything out of this conversation with Elizabeth and I, you don't have to buy our books. You don't have to go to our course. You don't have to subscribe to our Patreon. We just ask that you donate some money to Mala, and that is all we ask. And we have got, let's see, we raised $50. Hong, thank you for that, by the way. I appreciate that. I feel like that's cheating a little bit, donating on his own fundraising event. But yeah, anybody out there, if you could donate, scan the QR code. Also, find the link to GoFundMe if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn. That link should be in the description of the event.
Yes, and I've been pasting links around as well in the chat, so hopefully you can find it there also. But that would be amazing. So, do you want to flash a little bit of where we are right now in the fundraiser?
Oh
Have we
yes, let me
gotten
share my screen again.
place a little
There's a
bit?
scene editor on this, which is really neat, but like I don't know how to share the screen. Every time I do one of these restream live events, something goes wrong or breaks. But let's see. All right, I'm sharing my screen. Here we are.
Nice.
No, that's my Google Calendar. That's not what you want. Where did it go? There we go. All right. Share. I don't know why it looks like all. It looks all. I guess I got to change the browser size. I don't know. Anyway.
There you go.
All right.
Oh, that's pretty
There
good.
we go. Perfect. All right. So let's see. We are trying to raise $50,000. We've got 18. We've got a ways to go. You don't have to raise. You don't have to donate all that much money. $5, $10, $25. That would be amazing. These links are going to stay up for the long term. I'm sure Mala and her family could use help past just today for sure. So please, 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 if you can afford it, any bit helps.
Awesome. Thank you all.
All right. Anything else to add?
I think that's about it. I know there's some other sessions people are going to probably want to hop off and check
All
out. Are we
right.
the last one for today?
We're the last one on the
On the
main
calendar?
calendar, but
Okay.
I'm sure there's other stuff going on.
Yeah,
Hong, if
definitely go
you want
check
to
that
leave a
out.
comment, let us know. But yeah, please check those out. I'm really looking forward to joining some of these as I've got meetings tomorrow. I'm doing another one of these at 10
Ah,
a.m. Eastern tomorrow. I don't have a confirmed guest yet, but Joe Natali, I think, is trying to cancel a meeting with his client
awesome.
to come on. Joe, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I
But
know.
he may or may not be coming on. So I'm excited about that. I should be able to confirm that at some point. But yeah,
Awesome.
so that's that. Yeah, cool. So this will be on, by the way, anyone who's just catching this at the tail end, when we are done, it'll start over and you'll be able to watch it on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And I will share this out so everybody can see it later. So yeah, that's
Oh,
it.
I
Well, thanks
see.
for joining, everybody. Sorry, you
Thanks,
said something?
Nahal. I just want to do a quick shout out. Thank you for donating. Nahal and I have
Oh,
done some
nice.
of these
Oh, thank you
live
so
streams
much.
before. He's amazing. Thank you so much. It really helps. So good to see you. Appreciate you coming out. And everybody else who came on the YouTube channel and on LinkedIn to watch. We love you.
All
Thank you.
right. Thanks, y'all. All right. Let's see. I will end the stream. All right. See you.